Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing at the edge of a quiet lake at dawn. The surface is smooth as glass. Not a ripple disturbs the stillness. Then, a single pebble drops into the water, and the circles spread outward, wider and wider, until the entire lake is touched by the motion of that one small stone. Our thoughts are just like that pebble. Small, invisible, often unnoticed, but the moment they fall into the stillness of the mind, they create ripples that spread into every part of our lives. Florence Scovel Shinn, the quiet yet powerful voice of the early 20th century, taught a truth that many of us forget. Life is not ruled by luck, chance, or fate, but by thought, by word, and by the quiet blueprint we carry within. A story of lack and awakening. Let me tell you a story. Once, there was a woman who lived with constant worry. Each morning, she woke up and thought, I never have enough, not enough money, not enough time, not enough love. Her mind repeated the same phrases until they became invisible background noise. When bills arrived, she sighed, of course, there's never enough. When opportunities came, she whispered to herself, I can't, I don't have what it takes. And life, obedient as a servant, echoed her words back to her. Doors closed, money slipped away, relationships soured. The invisible blueprint of her thoughts shaped her reality. But then, one day, she came across a little book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. She read a line that startled her. Your word is your wand. The words you speak create your destiny. For the first time, she considered the possibility that her thoughts were not harmless. They were not random. They were instructions, commands, blueprints handed over to the universe. And if she wanted a new life, she would have to build a new blueprint with new thoughts, new words, and new faith. This video is not just about Florence Scovel Shinn's philosophy. It's about you, because right now, as you listen, your mind is drawing blueprints. Some are blueprints of abundance, joy, and freedom. Others, perhaps, are blueprints of fear, limitation, and self-doubt. Florence believed that abundance is natural, and lack is only a false picture created by wrong thinking. The key, she said, is not to struggle harder, not to force life into shape, but to correct the inner image, to practice the magic of right thinking. And that is the journey we will take together in this video. Think of an architect. Before a single brick is laid, the architect draws a plan. That plan may look simple on paper, but it holds the power to guide the construction of an entire building. Florence taught that your thoughts are the same. They are architectural lines. Your words are the ink that reinforces the design. Your faith is the builder that makes it real, and your willingness to let life flow is the energy that carries it forward. If your blueprint is small, fearful, or confused, the building of your life will look the same. But if your blueprint is bold, abundant, harmonious, and clear, then step by step, brick by brick, your life begins to reflect it. So, as you listen, I invite you to slow down, breathe, let your body relax, and let your mind soften. This is not a lecture. It is a story, a conversation with your inner self. In the next hours, we will walk through Florence Scovel Shinn's most powerful lessons, each wrapped in stories, examples, and gentle reminders that abundance is not somewhere out there. It is here, within you, waiting to be unlocked. You don't need to force it. You don't need to chase it. You only need to align your thoughts, your words, and your faith with the blueprint of truth. By the end of this journey, you will see how a shift in thought can shift an entire destiny. A single word, spoken in faith, can open doors that once seemed closed. Fear loses its grip when replaced with trust in divine order. Resistance melts when you choose flow over struggle. And abundance becomes natural, inevitable, not because you force it, but because you remember it was yours all along. Florence once said, "There is a supply for every demand." And so, as you listen, I ask you to hold a quiet demand in your heart, a desire for change, a wish for freedom, a vision of abundance, because the words and stories that follow are not just ideas, they are seeds. If you plant them with faith, they will grow. The lake is still again, the pebble has been dropped, ripples are spreading. From this moment forward, Every word you hear will become part of your own inner blueprint. This is the magic of right thinking. This is Florence Scovel Shinn's gift to us. And this, dear listener, is the beginning of your blueprint for abundance. There was once a young man who always believed he was unlucky. Every time he walked into a room, he carried a cloud over his head. If a job opportunity appeared, he thought to himself, "Someone else will get it, not me." If he wanted to start something new, he sighed, "Things never work out for me." And life, like an obedient mirror, reflected his thoughts back to him. Doors closed, friends drifted away, money slipped through his fingers as though it had wings. He could not see that his world was simply echoing what he held in his mind. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that thought is not idle. Thought is a living force, a seed planted in the soil of the universe. Every thought, whether fearful or faithful, takes root, and in time, it grows into the very experiences we call life. She said that right thinking is not a luxury, not a pastime, but the blueprint by which everything is constructed. If the mind is filled with lack, life will faithfully deliver lack. If the mind is filled with harmony, life will construct harmony. The young man one day met a teacher who asked him a simple question. "What is the story you keep telling yourself?" He paused, unsure how to answer. She smiled and said, "Listen closely. Your words reveal your thoughts, and your thoughts reveal your blueprint. If you want a new life, you must begin by thinking a new thought." It seemed too simple, too easy. But he was tired of his constant struggle, and so he began. The first day he caught himself thinking, "I never succeed." He stopped, took a breath, and whispered instead, "Success flows to me easily." It felt strange, even untrue, but he spoke it anyway. The next day, when bills arrived, he caught himself murmuring, "I can't pay this." Again, he paused and replaced the thought with, "I always have more than enough to meet every need." Something inside him softened. He felt a little lighter, as though he had taken off an old coat that was far too heavy. Florence would say that this was the turning point, because every thought carries a vibration, and every vibration attracts its likeness. To dwell on failure is to magnetize failure. To dwell on abundance is to summon it like a long, lost friend. The universe is not against us, nor is it for us. It simply reflects the patterns we hold most often in the mind. Like the sun shining through a window, the light takes the shape of whatever frame it passes through. Change the frame, and the light forms a new picture. Think of a garden. If you plant seeds of thorns, you will not expect roses to grow. If you scatter weeds, you will not be surprised when weeds spring up. Yet many people scatter seeds of fear and lack in their thoughts, then are astonished when their lives bloom with difficulty. Florence said, "Do not fight the weeds. Do not curse the thorns. Simply plant new seeds. Plant them daily, faithfully, joyfully, and soon the garden must change." The young man began to treat his mind like a sacred garden. Each morning, before stepping out of bed, he whispered affirmations of abundance. Each night, before closing his eyes, he replayed moments of gratitude. Slowly, he noticed changes. A friend he had not spoken to in years reached out with a new opportunity. A bill was unexpectedly paid in full. A stranger gave him words of encouragement at the exact moment he needed them. Nothing about the outer world had shifted overnight, yet everything seemed to be aligning differently. Florence explained this mystery with simple clarity. Thought creates an inner mold. Life pours itself into that mold, hardening into events and circumstances. If the mold is broken, crooked, or filled with fear, the events will appear the same. But the moment the mold is reshaped with right thinking, the events shift. They may not change instantly, but gradually, like dawn dissolving the night, life rearranges itself to match the new thought. She told a story of a woman who constantly worried about her finances. Every day she repeated, "I can't afford it. I'll never have enough." One day Florence gently corrected her, "Never use your words to paint lack. Speak instead as though abundance is already here." At first the woman resisted, but eventually she tried. She began declaring, God is my supply. All that is mine by divine right is now released to me. I live in plenty and ease. Within weeks, unexpected income began to appear. New doors opened. People offered her help and opportunities she could not have imagined. She was astonished, but Florence only smiled because she knew the law was at work. The law is impartial. Just as gravity does not decide who may fall and who may float, the law of thought does not choose who deserves abundance. It responds to the blueprint held most firmly in the mind. When the mind says, "I am poor," the law answers, "As you think, so it is." When the mind says, "I am abundant," the law replies in the same way. There is no favoritism, no judgment, only reflection. This is why Florence insisted that right thinking is a discipline, a practice, a daily choice. The world may offer thousands of reasons to worry, but each worry is like watering a weed. Every fearful thought strengthens the roots of lack, but every faithful thought waters the seeds of abundance. The young man discovered that he could not always control what thoughts knocked at the door of his mind, but he could choose which ones to invite inside. He imagined his mind as a grand hall. At the door stood two guests, fear and faith. Fear knocked loudly, demanding attention. Faith knocked softly, waiting patiently. For years, he had let fear stride in, sit at the table, and dictate the conversation. But now he chose differently. He welcomed Faith, gave her the best seat, and let her words fill the room. The more he listened, the more fear seemed to fade into silence. One evening, as he reflected on his day, he realized something astonishing. His life was no longer filled with constant struggle. Opportunities seemed to appear more easily, problems dissolved instead of multiplying. He felt lighter, freer, more at peace. And he remembered the teacher's words, "If you want a new life, you must begin by thinking a new thought." This is the essence of Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching. Your thoughts are not small, they are not fleeting shadows. They are blueprints, seeds, vibrations. They are the silent architects of your destiny. If you think lack, you will live lack. If you think harmony, you will live harmony. And if you dare to think abundance calmly, faithfully, consistently, abundance must appear. Right thinking is not simply positive thinking. It is not repeating empty words. It is aligning thought with truth, with the higher order of life, with the certainty that abundance is already here. It is planting seeds of trust, not fear. It is shaping a mold so clear and strong that life has no choice but to pour itself into it. The young man's story is not unusual. It is your story, my story, the story of anyone willing to change the pictures in the mind. The law is simple, but its effects are profound. One new thought can begin the unraveling of years of struggle. One new affirmation can begin the opening of doors long shut. One new blueprint can begin the construction of a life more abundant, harmonious, and free than ever imagined. And so, as we continue this journey, remember this: you are not a victim of circumstance. You are the thinker of thought, the sower of seeds, the architect of the invisible plan. Your life is not fixed. It is fluid, malleable, responsive. It listens to your thoughts and waits for your command, and the command is given, not with force, but with gentle, consistent, faithful, right thinking. This is the beginning of the blueprint. This is the first step in the magic of right thought. There is a quiet power that many people overlook, a force so common that it is used every hour of every day, often carelessly. That force is the spoken word. Florence Scovel Shinn often said, "Your word is your wand." With your words, you write invisible commands upon the air, and life, obedient as always, carries them out. Words are not idle sounds. They are spells, vibrations, living seeds that take root in the soil of the universe. Think of the countless times people casually say, "I can't," or "I never," or "It's impossible." They believe they are only describing life as it is, but in truth, they are giving orders. Every "I can't" becomes a closed door. Every "I never" becomes a repeating pattern. Every "It's impossible" becomes a wall that rises higher and stronger. What they do not realize is that the word is law, and the law does not question, it only fulfills. There was once a woman who longed for health and strength, yet each day she sighed to her friends, "I feel so weak. I am always sick." Her words, spoken again and again, became chains around her life. No matter how many medicines she tried, the sickness lingered. One day she came across Florence's teachings and was struck by the idea that words could be changed. She began, awkwardly at first, to replace her statements. Instead of declaring weakness, she whispered, "I am strong. I am whole. Divine life flows through me." At first it felt like a lie, but Florence reminded her that the universe does not respond to appearances, it responds to the word. Slowly, almost mysteriously, her body began to heal. She grew stronger. The sickness loosened its grip, and one day she looked in the mirror and realized she had spoken herself into a new reality. This is not magic in the sense of tricks or illusions. It is the simple law that what you speak consistently, you believe, and what you believe consistently, you experience. Words are the bridges between thought and manifestation. A thought, held silently, is powerful. But when spoken, it becomes sharper, clearer, more commanding. The moment the word is released, it moves outward, shaping conditions, attracting likeness, building experiences. Florence often told her students to guard their tongues carefully. She would say, "Do not speak of failure. Do not speak of lack. Do not give voice to the things you wish to escape. For to speak of them is to breathe life into them." She knew that many people fail, not because they lack ability, but because they constantly rehearse their failures in speech. They tell the story of their struggles again and again, and life, ever faithful, says, "So be it." There was a man who longed to prosper, yet each day he declared, "I never have enough money. Everything goes wrong for me." No matter how much he earned, it slipped away. He was caught in a cycle, unable to see that it was his own words weaving the trap. When he began to study Florence's work, he reluctantly tried a new approach. He began to say, "Money comes to me easily and in expected and unexpected ways. I am divinely provided for. I prosper in everything I do." The first time he said it, he felt foolish, but he persisted. Day after day, he repeated the words, not with strain, but with gentle consistency. And then, slowly, the pattern shifted. Small amounts of money arrived unexpectedly. Opportunities opened. He received help at just the right moment. What once seemed like coincidence was in fact the law responding to his new command. This is why Florence called the word a wand. It is not a weapon to strike against life, but a tool to shape it. Imagine an artist with a brush. With each stroke, a picture appears on the canvas. In the same way, with each word, a picture is painted upon the canvas of the invisible. If you wish to see a new picture in your life, you must choose new words. But here lies a challenge. Most people speak unconsciously. They repeat the phrases of their families, their cultures, their fears, never realizing that they are writing scripts that life must perform. They say, "Life is hard," and life becomes hard. They say, "People can't be trusted," and untrustworthy people appear. They say, "I'll never get ahead," and they do not. It is not punishment, it is simply the law at work. The universe listens to the spoken word and responds without judgment. Florence told of a woman who constantly exclaimed, "I always miss the train. Nothing ever works out for me." And sure enough, she was always late, always missing opportunities. Florence gently corrected her and told her to declare instead, "I never miss what belongs to me by divine right. Everything comes in perfect timing." The woman tried it, and soon she noticed the strangest coincidences. Trains delayed just long enough for her to catch them. Opportunities arriving at the exact right moment. Doors opening without struggle. The words had rewritten her experience. The same power can be used for good or for ill. Just as a knife can cut bread or cause harm, words can build or destroy. How many times has a child been told, "You'll never amount to anything," and carried those words like a curse into adulthood? And how many times has a single encouraging word lifted someone into a destiny they never dreamed possible? Words are spells, and we are all spell casters, whether we know it or not. This is why Florence urged her students to speak only words of blessing. If you desire abundance, speak abundance. If you desire health, speak health. If you desire love, speak love. Do not describe the lack, declare the presence. Do not rehearse the fear, proclaim the faith. Even when appearances deny it, even when circumstances contradict it, keep speaking the truth you wish to see. For the word, once released, carries a life of its own. There was once a woman who longed for love, yet she constantly said, "No one wants me. I will always be alone." And so her words built walls around her. Then, after reading Florence's teachings, she began to declare, "I am irresistible. Love surrounds me. The right relationship comes to me in perfect timing." She repeated these words daily, not in desperation, but in quiet faith. Months later, she met someone who treated her with the kindness she had long desired. She often laughed and said, "I spoke him into my life." The beauty of this law is that it does not require effortful striving. You do not need to push or force. You need only to choose your words carefully, speak them faithfully, and trust that life is listening. The universe never fails to answer the spoken word. Sometimes the answer comes swiftly, like lightning. Other times it unfolds slowly, like dawn rising over the hills. But it always comes, for the word never returns void. As you listen now, notice the words that linger in your own mouth. What phrases do you repeat? What stories do you tell about yourself, your finances, your relationships, your future? Are they words of abundance or words of lack? Are they spells of freedom or spells of bondage? The good news is that no word is final. You can begin this very moment to speak a new language, a language of faith, harmony, and abundance. The word is your wand. With it, you cast the picture of your life. With it, you call forth the unseen into the seen. With it, you build the bridges that carry you from fear to freedom, from lack to plenty, from struggle to ease. Every sentence is a brushstroke on the canvas of your destiny. And if you do not like the picture before you, you need only choose new words and begin again. This is the magic Florence Scovel Shinn gave to the world. She reminded us that our words are not empty sounds, but living forces. They are commands to the unseen, invitations to the infinite, blueprints written in sound. Guard them well, speak them with love, use them with faith, for they are the spells by which life itself takes shape. And so, as the young man in our story continued his journey, he learned not only to think differently, but to speak differently. No longer did he say, "I can't." No longer did he declare, "Nothing works out." Instead, he spoke as one who knew his words were wands, painting the life he wished to see. And slowly, beautifully, life responded. Opportunities multiplied, friendships deepened, abundance began to flow. The spells he once cast in fear were replaced with spells of faith, and the picture of his life transformed before his very eyes. Fear is a shadow that follows many lives. It whispers at night when the room is dark and quiet. It lingers in the morning when decisions must be made. It shows up in bank accounts, in relationships, in health, disguising itself as caution, as doubt, as endless what-ifs. Florence Scovel Shinn was bold in her declaration. Fear is nothing more than faith turned upside down. Fear is faith in evil, faith in lack, faith in misfortune. And just as faith in good produces miracles, faith in fear produces the very disasters one dreads. There was a man who dreamed of starting a business. His heart burned with ideas, and he longed to step into freedom. But each time he considered it, fear spoke louder than his vision. What if you fail? What if you lose everything? What if no one supports you? And so, year after year, he remained in the same job, unsatisfied, frustrated, longing for more but chained by invisible cords. His fear was faith in failure, and because he believed in it, his world stayed small. Florence would have told him what she told so many others. Replace fear with faith, speak against the shadow, declare boldly, "I walk in faith, not fear." Everything I need is prepared for me. The supply is ready, the way is clear. She reminded her students that fear and faith cannot occupy the same space. One must give way to the other. To dwell on fear is to water it until it grows tall and strong. To dwell on faith is to feed the soul until courage blossoms. One woman came to Florence in tears. She was ill, frightened, and convinced that her end was near. She repeated over and over, "I'm afraid it's too late. I'm afraid I cannot recover." Florence listened patiently, then said with firm gentleness, "Stop giving faith to fear. Begin to speak life." She instructed the woman to declare daily, "I am divinely protected. I am filled with life and health. Fear has no power over me." The woman resisted at first, insisting that the fear was too strong, but Florence urged her to persist, even in weakness, even with trembling lips. Weeks later, the woman returned with brightness in her eyes. Her health was improving, her fear had lessened, and hope had returned. What medicine could not accomplish, faith had begun to restore. Faith is not blind hope. It is not wishful thinking. It is the certainty that behind appearances there is a higher order, a divine law that cannot fail. When fear says, "You will be defeated," faith replies, "I cannot lose what belongs to me by divine right." When fear says, "You will go without," faith answers, "All that is mine is already prepared and waiting." Florence taught that faith is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the quiet trust that what you desire is already yours in truth, even if appearances deny it. Imagine a traveler walking through a dense forest at night. Fear sees only the shadows, the branches that scratch, the sounds that echo. Faith sees the path beneath the feet, the stars above the trees, the destination waiting at the edge of the woods. Both travelers walk the same road, but one stumbles in terror while the other moves forward in peace. The road does not change, the inner vision does. Florence told many stories of faith triumphing over fear. One man had lost his position and faced ruin. He was consumed with dread, imagining hunger, debt, disgrace. Florence instructed him to hold fast to faith, to declare, "God is my supply. My perfect work is already prepared. Nothing can be withheld from me." He resisted, but she pressed him to continue. Within weeks, a new opportunity appeared, greater than the one he had lost. He often said afterward that the job had always been waiting for him, hidden by the fog of his own fear. Fear is persuasive because it speaks with such authority. It paints vivid pictures of disaster, convincing the mind that danger is certain. But Florence insisted that those pictures are illusions, shadows cast by imagination. Faith paints brighter pictures, equally vivid, of success, abundance, health, and joy. The question is never whether you will imagine, but what you will imagine. Will you feed the shadows, or will you feed the light? The young man who had once thought himself unlucky found himself at this very crossroads. Though his thinking and words were improving, fear still knocked loudly. Each time a new opportunity appeared, the voice of doubt whispered, "What if it fails?" Each time he felt abundance coming, the shadow murmured, "What if it disappears?" He realized then that fear was not an enemy outside of him, but a habit inside of him, and habits could be broken. He began to treat fear as an uninvited guest. When it knocked, he refused to open the door. Instead, he called on faith. He whispered affirmations, "I trust divine order. I walk in safety. Everything I need is already given." At first, the fear seemed stronger. It shouted through the windows, rattled the doors, tried to storm the house. But the more he fed faith, the weaker fear became. Slowly, the guests stopped knocking. Slowly, the house grew peaceful. One evening, as he sat quietly, he realized something profound. Fear had ruled him not because it was powerful, but because he had believed its voice. The moment he withdrew that belief, fear lost its grip. He laughed softly, relieved, and whispered, "Faith was here all along. I only needed to listen." Florence called faith the substance of things hoped for. It is invisible, yet more solid than any stone. Fear is also invisible, but it crumbles under the weight of truth. Each person must choose daily which voice to follow, which vision to feed. To follow fear is to walk in darkness. To follow faith is to walk in light. There was another woman Florence spoke of who feared losing her home. Bills piled high, threats arrived, and every night she whispered in terror, "I will be ruined." Florence guided her to replace her words with declarations of faith. "I am safe. I am secure. My home is protected by divine law." Within days, a solution appeared. A relative offered unexpected assistance, and her situation was restored. The fear had painted a false picture, but faith had revealed the hidden provision. The truth Florence taught is simple but profound. What you fear, you draw near. What you have faith in, you invite into your life. The law does not distinguish between the two, it only responds. So if you must imagine, imagine in faith. If you must picture the future, picture it in light. Let faith be the architect, not fear. The young man learned this lesson well. Each time fear whispered, he answered with faith. Each time doubt rose, he replied with trust. Slowly, his world reflected the shift. Where once there was constant struggle, now there was flow. Where once there was dread, now there was expectation. He began to see fear not as a prison, but as a test, a doorway inviting him to choose again. And every time he chose faith, the doorway opened wider, revealing new abundance. This is the magic Florence Scovel Shinn taught. Fear is not destiny, it is only misplaced faith, and faith, once reclaimed, once spoken, once lived, is the bridge that carries you into abundance. There is a strange power in letting go. The world often teaches us to fight, to resist, to push against every obstacle with clenched fists and furrowed brows. Yet Florence Scovel Shinn taught a softer, wiser path, the law of non-resistance. What you fight, you give strength to. What you resist, you make real. But what you release, what you refuse to struggle against, loses its grip. She told her students that life is like a river. When you resist, you thrash against the current, exhaust yourself, and go nowhere. When you surrender in trust, the current carries you smoothly to your destination. Non-resistance does not mean weakness. It does not mean giving up. It means trusting the divine flow more than your own fear-driven struggle. There was once a woman who was deeply offended by her neighbor. Every day, the neighbor's words, glances, and actions seemed designed to annoy. The woman fumed in silence, replaying the insults, planning her responses, feeding her anger. When she sought Florence's advice, Florence smiled gently and said, "Do not resist her, bless her, see her as God sees her, speak only peace." At first, the woman resisted the advice. It felt too soft, too passive. But eventually, she decided to try. Instead of holding on to resentment, she began each morning with words of blessing. "I see my neighbor with love. I release her into peace." To her surprise, the neighbor's hostility began to fade. Soon, they were greeting each other with kindness. What force had changed the situation? Not argument, not resistance, but the quiet strength of non-resistance. Florence explained that every battle we fight in anger, in bitterness, or in fear is really a battle with shadows. Resistance keeps us tied to the very things we wish to escape. A person who resists poverty by constantly cursing it keeps poverty alive in their mind. A person who resists illness by continually fearing it strengthens the illness with attention. Non-resistance turns the eyes away from the shadow and back toward the light. The young man, who had already learned so much about right thinking and faith, soon found himself at this lesson. One day, he was unfairly accused at his workplace. He felt insulted, betrayed, filled with the desire to defend and argue. For hours, he replayed the situation in his mind, imagining sharp words, picturing himself victorious in debate. But the more he resisted, the heavier his spirit grew. At last, he remembered Florence's teaching. He sat quietly and whispered, "I do not resist. I release this matter to divine law. The truth will reveal itself." The next day, without any effort from him, the truth did come out. His accuser was revealed as mistaken, and the young man was cleared. No argument, no anger, no struggle had been required. He had simply stepped aside, and the current carried the truth to the surface. He learned then that resistance would have tied him to conflict, but non-resistance freed him. Florence often reminded her students of a profound statement: what you resist will persist. Many of them found this hard to accept at first. They had been taught all their lives to fight, to push, to argue, but as they practiced non-resistance, they began to see its quiet power. A woman who had struggled for years with debt stopped resisting it with fear and anger. Instead, she released it, declaring, "I am free. Abundance flows to me with ease." Soon, new channels of income opened, and her debts dissolved. Another who had resisted loneliness with despair began instead to affirm, "I am loved. I attract companionship with joy." In time, her circle of friends blossomed. The shadows had lost their power the moment she stopped feeding them with resistance. Non-resistance is not passivity. It is not ignoring problems. It is choosing to meet them with peace, with faith, with openness, instead of with fear and struggle. It is like the martial artist who does not block every strike with force but redirects it, letting the opponent's energy dissolve. Life, too, loses its sting when we refuse to fight shadows. The young man practiced this law in daily life. When delays appeared, he stopped resisting them with frustration. Instead, he whispered, "This delay is for my good. The way will open at the right time." When people opposed him, he stopped resisting them with bitterness. Instead, he blessed them and moved forward. Slowly, he discovered that life flowed more smoothly. Conflicts dissolved, opportunities opened, and peace grew in his heart. He realized that resistance had been a chain binding him to the past. Non-resistance was the key that set him free. One evening, while reflecting on his journey, he pictured himself standing by a river. He saw the waters rushing forward, steady and strong. For years he had tried to swim against them, exhausting himself in the struggle. But now he simply floated, carried gently forward. He smiled, realizing that this was life itself, a current designed to lead him exactly where he was meant to go. His only task was to trust it. Florence's voice echoed in his mind, "I do not resist. I rest in divine order. All things work together for my good." And he knew with deep certainty that this truth was not only for him, but for all who were ready to let go of struggle and enter the flow of faith. Words are not small things. They may appear simple, light as feathers, quickly spoken and quickly forgotten. But Florence Scovel Shinn reminded her students that words are seeds. Each word spoken takes root in the invisible garden of the mind and grows into experiences, conditions, and events. To speak carelessly is to plant weeds. To speak with intention is to sow flowers, fruits, and abundance. She often said, "Your word is your wand. With it, you call forth beauty or sorrow, wealth or lack, joy or despair." Many people curse their own lives without realizing it, repeating phrases like, "I never have enough," or "nothing ever works out for me." These words, charged with emotion, become commands to the unseen forces of life, and those forces obey. But when the words shift, when a person speaks in faith, declaring, "Everything I need comes to me in perfect timing," the results change. Life bends to the tone of the spoken word. There was a woman who constantly said, "I always catch colds in the winter." And so, each winter without fail, she did. When Florence explained the law to her, she was startled. She had never thought her casual words carried power. Florence urged her to change her declaration. The woman began to affirm instead, "I am healthy and strong. No weather can harm me." That winter, for the first time in years, she remained well. What had changed? Not the season, not her body, but her words. The young man, who had been practicing faith and non-resistance, soon realized that his words were still careless at times. When things went wrong, he would sigh and mutter, "Just my luck." When opportunities slipped away, he would shake his head and say, "I never get a break." Each phrase was like a key locking the door to his good. Florence's teaching returned to him. Words are commands. If he commanded lack, lack would come. If he commanded abundance, abundance would answer. He began to experiment. Instead of saying, "I can't afford it," he spoke, "If it is mine by divine right, it will come to me easily." Instead of sighing, This always happens to me. He said, everything works together for my good. At first, the words felt strange, almost like play acting. But as he persisted, he noticed something subtle. His feelings shifted. He felt lighter, more hopeful, more open. And soon, events began to shift as well. Small opportunities appeared, delays resolved themselves, and solutions unfolded with ease. The words he spoke were shaping the path beneath his feet. Florence told the story of a man who came to her in despair, declaring, "I am lost. I have nothing left." She corrected him firmly, "Never say you are lost. Speak instead, I am guided, I am provided for, my path is clear." The man resisted at first, saying he could not speak what did not feel true. But Florence reminded him that words are not mirrors of the present. They are blueprints for the future. The man obeyed reluctantly, repeating the affirmations daily. Weeks later, he returned with joy in his eyes. New opportunities had opened. His finances were recovering, and he felt hope again. The words had been the bridge from despair to renewal. The spoken word is creative because it is charged with belief. When spoken with conviction, it sends forth vibration into the unseen, attracting conditions that match. Even idle words carry seeds, but words spoken with faith are like fire, lighting the way ahead. Florence warned her students to guard their tongues, to avoid careless phrases of fear, anger, or defeat. She encouraged them instead to declare what they wished to see, even before it appeared. One woman was deeply worried about her daughter, who was far from home and often ill. She confessed to Florence, "I am always saying I fear the worst for her." Florence replied, "Then you are calling the worst. Speak only the best. Declare, my daughter is safe, happy, and healthy. She is divinely protected wherever she goes." The woman obeyed, changing her words from fear to faith. In time, her daughter's health improved and peace returned to their lives. The young man began to notice how the people around him spoke. Some filled their days with complaints, with constant talk of failure, and their lives seemed heavy. Others spoke with hope, with laughter, with affirmations of good, and their paths seemed brighter. He realized then that every word spoken is a choice, a seed of darkness or a seed of light. He resolved to make his words treasures, not traps. At times he stumbled. Old habits returned, and he would catch himself muttering complaints. But instead of despairing, he corrected himself quickly, replacing the negative with the positive. Slowly, this practice became natural. His words began to flow more easily toward faith than toward fear, and as they did, his outer life mirrored the change. One evening, sitting alone, he whispered, "Every word I speak is a command to life. Let my words be words of faith, of abundance, of joy." As he spoke, he felt a deep certainty, as though the universe itself leaned closer to listen. And in that moment, he knew that his words were not small at all. They were the very building blocks of his destiny. Florence once said, "Do not let your speech betray you. A person may pray for abundance but spend the rest of the day declaring lack. A person may seek health but constantly confess weakness. The law responds not only to prayer but to the daily rhythm of words. To speak in alignment with faith is to keep the channel clear. To speak in fear is to block it. The truth is simple yet profound. Words create worlds. Every phrase is a brushstroke on the canvas of life. The question is not whether you will paint, but what picture you will choose. And so, the young man learned to wield his words as Florence had taught, not as idle chatter, but as living seeds of abundance. Each sentence became a step, each affirmation a light, each declaration a bridge. Slowly, steadily, his life blossomed in harmony with the words he spoke. There is a voice that speaks beneath the noise of the world. It does not shout, it does not argue, it does not demand. It whispers, it nudges, it tugs gently at the heart like a current beneath still waters. Florence Scovel Shinn called this the voice of intuition, the inner guidance that connects each soul to the divine. She believed that when we listen to this voice, we are never lost. When we ignore it, we stumble in confusion. Many people look only to logic, to reason, to what their eyes can see. They weigh pros and cons, calculate risks, and plan carefully. There is wisdom in reason, but Florence reminded her students that reason alone cannot see the whole picture. Intuition sees around corners. It knows the path before the mind does. It whispers of opportunities the eyes cannot yet detect. To follow it is to walk in light. One woman once came to Florence with a difficult decision. She had been offered two paths. One seemed secure but uninspiring, the other uncertain but filled with promise. She could not decide. Florence asked her, "What does your inner voice say?" The woman hesitated. She admitted that deep down, she longed for the second path, though it frightened her. Florence said, "Then follow the deep desire. That is your divine guidance." The woman chose the uncertain path. At first it was difficult, but soon doors opened, blessings flowed, and her life blossomed in ways she had never imagined. She later said that had she ignored the whisper, she would have missed her destiny. The young man, who had been learning the laws of faith, non-resistance, and the spoken word, found himself at a crossroads as well. An opportunity arose that seemed good on the surface, yet something in his heart resisted. Logic told him to take it, that it was the safe and sensible choice, but a quiet unease stirred inside him. He wrestled with the decision for days until he remembered Florence's teaching. Intuition is the divine speaking to you. Trust it above appearances. So he sat in silence, closed his eyes, and asked within, "What is the right step for me?" A gentle impression rose, not in words but in feeling. "Wait, do not take this path. Trust the delay." Though his mind protested, though friends urged him forward, he obeyed the whisper. Weeks later, the truth revealed itself. The opportunity was not what it seemed. It would have trapped him in trouble. Another door soon opened, far better than the first. In that moment, he understood the wisdom of inner guidance. Florence often explained that intuition is like a compass in the soul. It points always toward harmony, abundance, and right action, but many drown it out with noise, with worry, with doubt, with endless chatter. To hear it clearly, one must quiet the mind, release fear, and listen deeply. The voice may not explain itself. It may simply say, "Turn here," or "Wait." Trust is required, for the whisper is delicate, and it will not compete with the roar of fear. She told her students to practice small acts of listening. If you feel a sudden nudge to call a friend, do it. If you feel drawn to take a different route home, follow it. These small obediences strengthen the ear of the soul. Over time, intuition grows louder, clearer, more familiar. Soon it becomes a trusted companion, guiding each step. The young man began to practice this daily. When choosing words, he asked, "What feels right within?" When meeting people, he listened to the quiet impressions that arose. Sometimes he felt peace, other times caution. He learned to trust these feelings more than appearances. And as he did, his life unfolded with greater ease. Conflicts lessened, opportunities increased, and he began to sense that he was being guided by an unseen hand. One day, while walking through the marketplace, he felt an unexplainable urge to turn down a narrow street. At first, he resisted. It seemed unnecessary, but he remembered his commitment to follow intuition. He turned, and there he met an old acquaintance who offered him news of a new opportunity. That one meeting changed the course of his work and his prosperity. He smiled, realizing that had he ignored the nudge, he would have missed the blessing. Florence warned that intuition is easily drowned by fear. Many people hear the inner voice but immediately argue with it. That cannot be right, they say. It makes no sense. And so they dismiss it, only to later regret ignoring the whisper. She urged her students to trust first and question later. The voice of the divine is not bound by human logic. It sees what is hidden and leads to what is best. The young man once ignored this voice. He felt a strong hesitation about a decision, yet he brushed it aside. He convinced himself with logic, silenced the whisper, and pressed forward. The result was disappointment and loss. In the quiet aftermath, he admitted his mistake. He promised himself he would not ignore intuition again. That moment of humility deepened his practice, teaching him to honor the guidance within above all else. Over time, he noticed something beautiful. Intuition did not only protect him from harm, it also led him toward joy. It drew him to friendships that nourished his spirit, to places that inspired him, to choices that opened doors. Each time he obeyed, life grew richer. Each time he resisted, the way grew harder. Slowly, he began to see intuition not as occasional luck, but as a constant guide, always present, always faithful. One evening, as he reflected, he felt gratitude swell in his heart. He whispered, "I am never alone. The divine walks with me, speaks to me, guides me." He realized then that intuition was not just a tool for decisions. It was a reminder of connection, a thread linking him always to the higher order of life. Florence's words came to him again. Intuition is the voice of God in the soul. And he knew deeply that to follow it was to walk in safety, in abundance, in peace. From that day forward, he resolved never again to ignore the quiet whisper, for within it lay the blueprint of his abundance, the secret map to his destiny. Abundance is not a pile of gold coins. It is not a vault filled with jewels or a table heavy with feasts. True abundance, Florence Scovel Shinn taught, begins as a state of mind. A person may hold riches in their hand yet live in fear of loss, and so they are poor. Another may hold very little yet walk in gratitude and expectation, and so they are rich. The outer world reflects the inner condition. To change the harvest, one must first change the soil of thought. Florence would often remind her students, "You cannot enter abundance while thinking lack." A person who constantly declares, "I cannot afford this," or "there is never enough for me," is closing the gates of their own garden. The law responds faithfully to every belief. If lack is the belief, lack becomes the experience. But when the mind shifts to abundance, when gratitude and expectation replace fear and doubt, doors open, channels flow, and supply appears in surprising ways. There was once a woman who constantly worried over money. Every bill that arrived filled her with dread. She repeated to herself, "There is never enough. I will never be free of debt." When she came to Florence, she poured out her despair. Florence listened quietly and then asked, "Why do you speak only of lack? Begin to declare abundance instead." She gave the woman a simple affirmation. "I have a lavish, steady, dependable income, consistent with integrity and joy." The woman repeated it daily, at first with doubt, then with hope, then with growing faith. Slowly, her situation changed. Unexpected income appeared, opportunities multiplied, and her debts lessened. She realized that abundance had always been possible, but her mind had been closed to it. The young man, who had been practicing faith, non-resistance, the spoken word, and intuition, soon discovered this lesson as well. Though his outer life was improving, he sometimes slipped into old thoughts of lack. When expenses rose, he sighed, "I can't keep up." When opportunities delayed, he muttered, "Maybe there isn't enough for me." Each time, he felt the weight of those words. He remembered Florence's teaching and decided to shift his inner state. He began each morning with gratitude. Before rising from bed, he whispered, "I am thankful for all I have and for all that is coming." He looked at simple things, the roof over his head, the food on his table, the friends who cared for him, and gave thanks. Gratitude softened his heart, lifted his mind, and prepared him for the day. Soon, he noticed that as he gave thanks for small things, larger blessings appeared. Florence taught that the mind is like a magnet. When it dwells on lack, it draws more lack. When it dwells on abundance, it draws supply. The shift does not always happen instantly, but it is inevitable. Just as a field must be prepared before harvest, so the mind must be cultivated before abundance appears. Gratitude, expectation, and trust are the seeds that yield plenty. There was a man who longed for success but constantly declared, "Opportunities never come to me." Florence corrected him. "Say instead, I am wide awake to my good. Opportunities appear for me every day." The man obeyed. At first, nothing seemed different, but after weeks of repeating the new words, he began to notice doors opening. People he had never considered before offered help. Ideas came to him at night. He realized that opportunities had always been present, but his state of mind had blinded him to them. With new eyes, he could finally see. The young man, too, experienced this. One evening he sat with his accounts, frowning at the numbers. A familiar wave of worry rose. But instead of surrendering to it, he paused, breathed deeply, and said aloud, "I live in a rich and friendly universe. All that I need is already prepared." As he spoke, the heaviness lifted. He closed his books and chose to trust. The very next day, a new offer of work arrived, enough to meet his needs and more. He smiled, whispering, "Abundance begins in the mind." Florence often told her students that abundance does not only mean money. It is health, joy, peace, friendships, creativity, freedom. To limit abundance to wealth alone is to miss its fullness. The universe is lavish, overflowing, endless in supply. The same sun that warms the flowers shines on every face without cost. The same air that fills the lungs does not run dry. To live in abundance is to recognize this endless giving, to trust that what is needed is always available. One woman once came to Florence, lonely and despairing. "I have no friends," she said. "No one cares for me." Florence replied, "Then you must begin to speak abundance of love. Declare, 'I am loved. I attract loving and loyal friends. I am surrounded by kindness.'" The woman obeyed, though at first it felt hollow. But within months her life changed. New companions appeared, invitations flowed, and her heart was filled with joy. She laughed, saying, "I thought I had nothing, but I had everything waiting. I only needed to open the door." The young man practiced this as well. Each evening he spoke not only of money, but of health, peace, and joy. "I am rich in love," he whispered. "I am rich in health. I am rich in opportunities." He felt his spirit expand. Even in quiet moments, when no coins changed hands, he felt full, safe, content. That inner abundance became the soil from which outer blessings grew. One night, while walking beneath the stars, he reflected on his journey. He remembered the years of fear, the constant struggle, the endless declarations of lack. And he saw how different his life had become, not because of sudden riches, but because of a change within. He now expected good, trusted provision, and walked in gratitude. He smiled softly, whispering, "Abundance is who I am. It was always here. I only needed to see it." Florence's words echoed through time. Man cannot enter the kingdom of abundance until he puts himself in the state of abundance. The kingdom is not far away. It is within, ready to be revealed. When the mind dwells in lack, the door remains shut. When the mind shifts to abundance, the gates swing wide, and life, faithful as the sunrise, delivers its treasures. As you sit with these words, let your imagination wander into the picture of your own life. Think of the quiet voice inside you that has long whispered that things could be better, brighter, and more aligned with the person you were meant to be. That voice, though often drowned out by the noise of doubt, is the same voice Florence Scovel Shinn believed in, the divine inner guide that nudges us toward right thinking. It has been there since you were a child, in those moments when you dared to dream without limits, when you saw yourself not as small or lacking, but as infinite, curious, and free. Somewhere along the way, that fearless vision may have faded. Life's trials, disappointments, and routines might have convinced you to settle for less, to expect less, to believe less. But right now, in this moment, you are being invited to listen again, to reawaken to the truth that your mind is a powerful instrument, and your thoughts are not idle. They are builders of your reality. Florence taught that every thought you hold is like a seed, and every word you speak is like water poured onto that seed. If you continually feed your life with thoughts of worry, struggle, and fear, then it is no surprise that the harvest mirrors those ideas. But if you dare to change the pattern, if you dare to think of harmony, abundance, love, and success, then you plant a new garden, one that grows into the life you desire. This is not wishful thinking. It is a law as real as gravity. Just as a seed, when nurtured, must grow into its destined plant, so too will your dominant thoughts and beliefs shape the world around you. Imagine waking tomorrow and deciding to think differently, to replace even one negative thought with a thought of confidence, gratitude, or faith. That small shift, Florence believed, is enough to begin a chain reaction. She often reminded her readers that we are playing the game of life. And like any game, it has rules. Right thinking is not just about being optimistic. It is about aligning your inner world with the divine blueprint of abundance that has been waiting for you all along. As you listen to this journey, allow yourself to relax into the rhythm of the words. You do not need to force understanding. Simply let the ideas sink in like gentle rain falling on the soil of your mind. This is not a lecture, but a soothing reminder of what you already know deep inside, that you are more powerful than your circumstances, that your story is not finished, and that abundance is not reserved for the few. It is the rightful inheritance of all who dare to think rightly. So take a breath, release the tension of the day, and let us walk together into Florence Scovel Shinn's timeless wisdom. In the hours to come, we will explore stories, reflections, and truths that have transformed lives for generations. Each word is here to encourage you, to guide you, and to awaken you to the reality that the life you long for begins not in the outside world, but in the unseen world of your thoughts. And as you will soon discover, when you change the way you think, you change the entire game of life.